KBLA Talk 1580. We're celebrating our 4th anniversary, and this track right here is the gift one of our devoted listeners presented to us.
Where you get some information, get a true education. Just to know, ooh, yeah. 1580.
How cool is that? Having a member of our KBLA delegation write us a song. Stop it! Our listeners love us and there ain't nothing we can do about it. Wouldn't want to. Thanks to Cardell and everybody else for turning on KBLA Talk 1580. We love you right black.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. Yeah.
I'm Tavis, Smiley. Glad to have you with us. What a spirited first hour that was, both of those conversations. I say all the time that this program is at its best when we're challenging you to re-examine the assumptions you hold, when we are helping you to expand your inventory of ideas and see the world through a different prism. Again, I appreciate both guests today, Sonia K. Wise Whitehead and Ruben Everett Jr. In our first hour. 2 great hours in front of us in this hour. Organizers and now co-authors Shanelle Matthews and Marzena Zukowska share their new book, Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. And then our third hour, another great guest, Alec Carcasanis is back with his new book called Propaganda, How Police and the Media Manipulate Our News. This is one of those days where I can see how all 3 hours are going to connect quite nicely, these dots, that is. We'll connect these hours quite nicely, so I'm delighted to have both Shanelle and Marzena, that is, on this program in this hour. Shanelle, how are you today? Good to have you on the program.
Hey, Tavis, so good to be here. Definitely excited to talk to you today.
Likewise. Marzena, how are you today?
I'm doing well. We are gearing up for our next book tour stop in Durham, and the weather's been beautiful. So, yeah, really excited to be here, Tavis.
Good stuff. Let me just start with a couple of broad questions, and we'll work our way inside the text. Again, I just mentioned a moment ago we've had some spirited conversations in the first hour already. We started today, the two of you weren't here, so let me just give you a quick recap. We started our first hour in conversation about KBJ, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was at the Essence Festival in New Orleans, I guess a week or two ago, July 4th, and was asked a question about how she felt about our democracy. And she eventually answered the question, but didn't really come at it the way that many of those black women thought that she should have. Then she shows up over the weekend, last Thursday, in fact, to be exact, in Indianapolis, in my home state of Indiana, speaking to the Bar Association, and they ask her what keeps her up at night, and without any equivocation or hesitation whatsoever, she jumped right in and said, "I lose sleep at night thinking about the state of our democracy." She went right in at it. And so one of our guests who was at the Essence Festival said she was just confused that, she wasn't as strong and as direct about the fragility of our democracy speaking to these black women as she was speaking to these white lawyers in Indiana. So we had, an interesting conversation about that. I only raised that because whatever one thinks about the state of our democracy right now, we are in a unique situation. And I am curious, for starters, Shanelle, how we even think about social movements in this moment. We'll get to the book again about how we build narrative power for 21st century social movements in the days to come. But in this moment, just put me inside the right frame for how we ought to be thinking about social movements in this peculiar American moment,
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I know that Justice Brown Jackson has been doing her best to ensure that democracy, well, what democracy we have is maintained in our society. And I know it's got to be difficult to be the lone dissenter on so
Oh, yeah.
many of the Supreme Court cases. But yeah, I mean, right now we are in a really interesting period. We're in what's called a reactionary political period. So politics is cyclical. Sometimes we're in progressive eras and sometimes we're in reactionary eras. And reactionary politics is really a political stance that seeks to return society to a previous state, often idealized or mythologized as a way to resist or reverse progressive change, because the 2010s was a progressive era, and that's, part of the timeline that our book covers. But when we think about what it means to be organizing and doing activism in a reactionary era, we have to remember that this particular time period it's not new. I mean, post-Reconstruction was also a reactionary era when there was so much Black political progress and America wasn't having it. I mean, that's what we're seeing happening now, right? Like, it's fundamentally backward looking. It opposes any movement that expands rights, that democratizes power, that challenges existing hierarchies. And so reactionaries often support authoritarian leadership, which is what we're seeing right now happen with the Trump administration. They want to try to, quote unquote, restore order and preserve traditional structures of dominance like white supremacy and patriarchy and nationalism. And our book gets into all of this stuff. But, it's important to remember, as I mentioned, that like during post-Civil War, the Jim Crow laws to today's efforts to ban books, to restrict gender-affirming care, or to criminalize protests, reactionary politics really relies on fear and repression. And so the role of the movement worker now is to push back on that. And we're seeing that with Palestinian resistance, with organizers who are doing mutual aid, who are protecting their neighbors against ICE. And so we're not just resisting these systems, we're really trying to rehearse what a new world could look like. And that's the role of the movement worker today in this reactionary era. And also to remember all the things that we won in that progressive era. We did so much. We exposed the war on terror as a racist machine of surveillance and control. We linked it to the occupation of Palestine. We insisted that healthcare should be a human right, not a privilege. And we're seeing this giant cut to Medicaid that will no doubtedly impact the most vulnerable people in our society, including poor people, Black people, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people. But during the 2010s, we did so much amazing work, and that is in part what we're seeing this immediate backlash in response to.
I got to get Shanelle to come out of her shell in this hour. She's so shy. Just teasing. I love a straightforward answer, and she gave it to me. We are in a reactionary era. I'm going to pick up on that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening. Charitable listening. It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
Hey, listen to this. All I needed was a new starter. Got a great deal on eBay. Did it myself.
Yeah, that's cool. But how about the soft purr of an upgraded exhaust when it fits just right?
For me, it's the little things. Like these new windshield wipers from eBay I installed.
From small fixes to big upgrades, eBay has all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Why'd I go to the doctor? My heart would race just taking my son to practice. It didn't feel right. So I got checked out. Turns out I have atrial fibrillation, which increases the risk of stroke about 5 times.
Symptoms like irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness can come and go. But if it's AFib, the risk of stroke remains. If you have symptoms, contact a doctor.
I'm so glad I did.
Visit notimetowait.com. Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Break out the champagne. Everybody get a glass.
Tavis Smiley is now ranked number 16 nationally and the highest rated talk show hosted by an African American on the 2025 Talkers Heavy 100 list of the most important talk radio hosts in the nation. Last year, Tavis ranked number 33, and the year before, number 45. The Tavis Smiley Show has rapidly expanded its national syndication to now include nearly 50 radio stations across the country and counting. Congratulations, Tavis.
Yeah. Are you having trouble hearing? Hearing loss can devastate the quality of your life. Now, there's an affordable fix for you or your loved one. Rated the best hearing aids of 2025 by Forbes Health, Audion Hearing has the highest quality hearing aids at the lowest prices, starting at just $98 a pair.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aid.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed.
Join over 1 million happy customers by going to audionhearing.com. That's AUDIEN hearing.com.
No one wants to leave behind stress for their family. That's why a trust or a will is so important. Without one, your assets might go to the wrong people or leave out loved ones. Also, probate is long, expensive, and often avoidable with a revocable trust. Trustandwill.com makes it simple to create a personalized estate plan. A trust or will provides clarity and peace of mind. Get 20% off on your estate plan documents by visiting trustandwill.com/radio.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Shanelle Matthews and Marzena Zukowska, our guest in this hour. Their new book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. And I'm delighted to have them on the program in this hour. Marzena, same question for you. Tell me how you think about social movements in real time. I was just saying in our first hour, at the end of the hour, we were talking about some evidence that seems to be suggesting that the MAGA base of Donald Trump is waking up and starting to push back, whether it's Iran or they're going crazy right now about these Jeffrey Epstein files, et cetera, et cetera. But there are voices in that MAGA movement, including Tucker Carlson, that are starting to push back on the administration and Trump in particular. Say nothing of the AG. That's their version of a social movement. But I'm curious as to how you think in this moment we process the notion of social movements given the fragility of our democracy.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for having us, Tavis. And I would actually echo everything that Shanelle said, and I would put it also in a global context. So, for my positionality, I grew up in the U.S., but I've been living in the U.K. for the last 7 years, and I've been seeing what I would call very explicitly the global resurgence of fascism, which is the largest one that we've had since the 20th century. And I would argue that what is happening in the U.S., and, this is echoed by the words of Dr. Barbara Ransby in Chicago, which is that we are not just seeing a resurgence of fascism, we are on a pathway to the political consolidation of fascist ideology. And I just want to step back and say that the writing, when we put the U.S. in conversation across a global context, the writing has been on the walls for a very long time. I remember in 2012 when Marine Le Pen in France, France's National Front, it's since been renamed, her father was a Nazi sympathizer. She came third on the ballot in the presidential elections, right? This was 2012. 2015, in the UK, we saw the Brexit campaign run on a xenophobic and racist platform. In Poland, my home country, where I was born, the Law and Justice Party also seized power in 2015. This was all a year before Donald Trump got elected and before he ran his campaign. So what we are seeing now, is 8-9 years after that. I mean, even if we step back further, the war on terror, which started at the turn of the century, at the start of the 21st century, it's narrative infrastructure, right? How we understand marginalized communities, how we talk about Muslims, its narrative infrastructure has extended into all areas of public life, and it has so because it's been linked to so many other ideologies that we know have functioned so well in the United States, settler colonialism, patriarchy, white supremacy. And I think, we need to heed the warnings of history, because history, as Chanel said, has a way of repeating itself, right? It is cyclical. And fascism as a way of reappearing with a new face, a new head, a new destructive agenda, but rooted in very much the same dominant narratives, many of which Chanel brought up, this kind of revisionist history, this nostalgia for a certain past, this glorification of a very violent past in this country. And I one thing that I talk about in my chapter in Liberation Stories with my colleague Chantal Lunt, about fascism is referencing Umberto Eco, who is an Italian philosopher. He grew up under Mussolini's regime, and he's studied fascist movements for decades. And he had this incredible essay that came out in 1995, which, now reading it over again, it's almost prophetic to what is happening now. But his argument is that we need to use the term fascism when we see it. We need to stop arguing over definitions, because the second any one characteristic of fascism comes alive, the entire ideology has a way of coagulating around it, and we get the slippery slope that we have today. So those would be my kind of arguments back: is yes, we are in a reactionary period, and yes, we are nearing our way towards fascist consolidation in the United States.
I take your last point, Marzena, and I couldn't agree more. I'm thinking, though, as you made that comment, I'm thinking about when Joe Biden used the fascism word and all the hell that broke loose here domestically. When that word came out of his mouth for a president to call this moment a moment of fascism, or at least impending fascism, Joe Biden took it on the chin for speaking that truth. And so we ought to call it when we see it. But there's something about that word that rubs people the wrong way, rubs people raw. And even the media, I think, the mainstream media, certainly to my read, could not handle Joe Biden using that F word, that particular F word, as it were. I digress on that for now. Maybe we'll get back to that. There are two questions swirling in my head at the same time. One is for Shanelle, one is for Marzena. Let me frame it this way, and then I'll get the questions out. One is about this reactionary era that Shanelle spoke of brilliantly earlier. And I want to ask her what seeded that, what fertilized this reactionary era that we are now in. Their book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. And this audience knows, I've said it more than once, that movements, to my mind, are rare. I'm a student of history, and movements are rare. As a matter of fact, I always put it this way. You start with a moment. That moment builds momentum, and if you're lucky, that momentum turns into a movement. Movements are rare. They don't happen overnight. Momentum, and movement is how I read these various movements that have happened in this country and around the globe over time. So just like movements don't happen overnight, global resurgences of fascism, Marzena, don't happen overnight either. So I'll start with you, Marzena, then I'll get back to Shanelle here. I am curious, same question but different frame. Yours is global, Shanelle's is domestic. What fertilized, what seeded the ground for this global resurgence of fascism that we're experiencing right now? Because you're right, it's not just here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic question, Tavis, and thank you so much for continuing to pull on this thread. I mean, here I will bring the work of Naomi Klein into the space and into conversation with us. In her book, she had a book out in 2020, Doppelganger. It came out right when the pandemic was happening. And she goes into this in a lot of depth, asking herself the same question, given the conditions that she had previously studied around neoliberalism, what has paved the pathway for this kind of different evolution of fascism. And one of her arguments, which I find very compelling, is that, fascism is not actually a progression from neoliberalism. And when I use the term neoliberalism, the simplest way I would define it is, the active putting of profits in front of people, the prioritization of the individual over the collective. We see this across the U.S., for example, in our privatized healthcare system. But Naomi Klein's argument is that it is actually neoliberalism that created the fertile ground for fascism to be able to thrive. It is the active disillusionment with neoliberalism and the inequalities that it's created, right since the Great Recession, that then paved the pathway for fascism to be able to thrive. So in that way, we need to understand both ideologies almost as mirror images of each other. And in that way, I think, one of the, 'cause I recognize we at least I skipped over the previous part of your question around, what is it that social movements can do? And I think this is where the act of naming fascism is not just, it's not just linguistic. It is an active social movement strategy. It's an active counter narrative strategy because it situates us in a much bigger context of fascist movements that have existed previously, right? And it also allows us to say, hey, we've been here before, we've seen the writings on the walls, and we have actually defeated fascism before, right? So what are the most successful aspects of social movements in the past that we can bring into the present? And I think this is where liberation stories and the authors that we feature throughout it is a powerful volume, because it puts contemporary social movements in conversation with past fights against active dominant narratives. It features everything from the reparations movement, to war on terror, and where the roots of this have come from. So, and what I would say as the next step forward is really like, we need to contextualize this moment and what is happening, and we need to root ourselves in solidarity, right? Not just solidarity across communities and movements here in the U.S., but we need to situate ourselves in transnational solidarity, right? What is the connection between what is happening in the United States to what is happening in the UK and Poland and Brazil and India? Thank you so much.
No, I'm pushing my way straight forward into the text specifically. There's a lot there to unpack. I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here. So one final question, and speaking of groundwork, Shanelle Matthews, that question that I posed for you a moment ago, which is what, and we both know this, these reactionary eras in America are cyclical. They come and they go, no question about it. To your mind, what was the fertilizer for this particular reactionary era that we find ourselves in right now, Shanelle?
I mean, there's so much to discuss here, and Marjana really laid it out beautifully. But just to focus here domestically, I mean, part of why we organized this anthology, which details world building narrative interventions made by the social movement left in the 21st century, is because we wanted to have a blueprint for how we built a progressive era over these last 24 years. I mean, we did so much, as Mars mentioned. We exposed the war on terror as racist machine of surveillance. It has and continues to have deep tentacles in our carceral systems. We insisted that, particularly in the Black Lives Matter movement and the immigrant rights movement, that the violence isn't coming from our communities, it's coming from the state. We made the case that environmental justice is racial justice, that reparations are not charity, that indigenous sovereignty is law. We advanced LGBTQ rights. We passed same-sex marriage. And, the critiques right now of the left are strong. Some are saying that we are siloed, that we're elitist, that we're navel gazing. They argue that we need to mirror the right in some ways, that we need to be vertically integrated or ideologically aligned. And, they critique our organizing and our reach and our digital presence. But all of the things I just mentioned, that is not the story of failure. It's the story of strategic, intentional disruption, and it's still unfolding. But as you mentioned, Tavis, and as Marjana talked about, the terrain is shifting really fast. We're living through the end of U.S. unipolar dominance. A multipolar world is emerging, one in which China and other BRICS nations are challenging U.S. supremacy. Neoliberalism is hemorrhaging its legitimacy, as Mars mentioned, and it also those promises of neoliberalism do not fool younger generations. I'm a lecturer at City College. I teach full-time young students, and I can tell you right now, they are being organized to dissent against those ideas. But the other thing I want to mention, and I spoke to this a bit earlier, is that when we think about reactionary politics, it's not something that's new. To deepen my own understanding of the rhetorical terrain that we're currently navigating, I return to the reactionary rhetoric that emerged post-Reconstruction, when the backlash to Black political power and multiracial democracy was very swift and very brutal. White Southern elites did not just use guns and laws, they also used stories. They called their resurgence a quote-unquote redemption, casting Black governance as chaos and white rule as order. And they also masked violence violent suppression with legal sounding terms like, quote, states' rights. They warned people of, quote unquote, Negro rule and the idea that Black people in power meant social collapse. And all of this, they used rhetoric to retrench power and to make it feel more moral. And right now, we're seeing the same thing happen with Donald Trump's playbook. His playbook is a direct descendant of that. His Make America Great Again is a rebranding of redemption, which invites Americans to return to a time before racial reckoning, gender equality, or global accountability. His law and order sloganeering echoes the post-Reconstruction defense of hierarchy and control. His narratives about immigrant invasion, Black criminality, and white victimhood are updated versions of the old fear-mongering about Black governance and outsider threat. So what we have to remember is that what reactionary politics and rhetoric does so effectively is it casts change as chaos. It casts difference as danger and equity as loss. It simplifies the world into binaries, us versus them, good versus evil. And then it scapegoats anyone who disrupts the status quo. And so we have to understand that the social movement rhetoric functions differently depending on the political cycle. And that's really what we're getting to in the book.
The book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. There's a lot in this text. I can't do justice to it even in 60 minutes. But Marzena, moments ago, gave us a pretty good overview of what's in the book. When we come forward, I want to go inside of it in this particular way. And we're talking about, narrative power frameworks. Let me just define this as they do in their writing. A narrative power framework is a way of seeing and acting to use symbolic resources, stories, messages, and narratives to resist oppression and build power for a liberatory society for all. That's the way they define a narrative power framework. That said, they believe that there are 6 interconnected elements that make that possible. When we come forward, I want to jump right into those 6 interconnected elements with Shanelle and Marzena. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Why does Tavis say, when we come forward? Because he's not going back. And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. 10 days after historic floods hit Texas Hill County, over 160 people remain missing. Kerrville officials say rain is slowing search efforts near Lake Nimitz. Kerrville Assistant Manager Michael Hornez says they are still searching.
They have a hard time searching in there because that water is you can't see through it.
The statewide death toll has now climbed past 130. The HBCU community is demanding the release of Morehouse grad Alex Maganda, detained by ICE in Texas. Supporters say his arrest highlights the risks Black immigrants face. The Free Alex Maganda movement is gaining national attention. And T-Mobile has dropped its DEI programs under pressure from the Trump administration. The move, praised by some federal officials, has sparked backlash from civil rights leaders who warn it threatens workplace equity. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice. Continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers head into the All-Star break after taking 2 of 3 from the Giants in San Francisco. They scored 3 runs after 2 outs in the 11th inning Sunday to beat the Giants 5-2. The Dodgers will have 4 players in the All-Star game Tuesday night in Atlanta. Catcher Will Smith, first baseman Freddie Freeman, designated hitter Shohei Ohtani, and pitcher Clayton Kershaw. The Angels ended the first half of the season with a 5-1 loss at home to Arizona. Even though the Angels are 2 games below 500 at 47-49, they have 6 more wins than what they had last season at the All-Star break. They were 14 games under 500 at the break last year. The Angels are 11-10 with interim manager Ray Montgomery. Montgomery took over for Ron Washington on June 20th when Washington stepped down because of undisclosed health reasons. Washington, one of 2 black managers in Major League Baseball, will not return this season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Every day, a child in poverty waits for a sponsor is another day of hopelessness. There are thousands of kids who've been waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Just text the word radio to 83393.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know? The United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time. Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
All I need is one mic.
With the KBLA Talk 1580 guest editorial, I'm Martin Gordon, chair of the Pasadena Community Coalition. Recently, I listened to a Tavis Smiley show conversation with James Farr. At one point, James said something that caught me off guard. Not because it wasn't true, but because it is. Black Altadena is gone. I know it may seem stupid and non-productive, but I stopped in that moment listening to Tavis and James. I broke down and cried. In the back of my mind, I told myself we can bring it back like it was. But James Farr's reality check hit me like a ton of bricks. My community is being murdered. I said murdered, not by the Altadena Eaton Canyon fire, but by the people we elect to protect us, and by greedy and gatekeeping nonprofits who cannot see the forest for the trees. For the first time since the fire, I truly feel and understand my wife's inconsolable pain. Because I'm struggling to find a path to recovery and at least some form of normalcy. My community is crumbling right in front of my face. Lack of funding to rebuild is slowly destroying us. Many of us can no longer hold out, and developers are gobbling up our property. When I hear voices like Tavis Smiley and James Farr speak truth to power on KBLA Talk 1580, it reminds me that we're not crazy, just unheard. Make no mistake here, KBLA delegation, this is war, and we the people of Black Altadena are losing. It's like waiting for reparation. Not gonna happen, brother. In this new orange man world, no one, no entity is persuaded by right or wrong. There is no consequence for doing the wrong thing, and no accolades or support for doing the right thing. Will war-torn Black Altadena survive? Your guess is as good as mine. But what have I got to lose? I'm in my 70s and don't have time to wait. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once suggested that riots break out when people have no hope. But there's nothing left to burn down in Altadena. I wish I could say I remain hopeful that my beloved community will rise again like a phoenix from the ashes. I wish I could. With a KBLA Talk 1580 guest editorial, I'm Martin Gordon, chair of the Pasadena Community Coalition. Pasadena Community Coalition at gmail.com. Reach out to me. As always, we welcome your feedback.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with Shanelle Matthews and Marzena Zukowska. Their book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. Pleased to have them on the program in this hour. I spent the first half hour sort of laying the framework for how we think about social movements at a time such as this, domestically and globally. And now I want to work my way inside the book itself and get to those six interconnected elements in a moment here. Shanelle, you first, though. I'm looking at some of the questions that are popping into our feed here as we work our way through this conversation. And I think this might actually fit in nicely now before we jump into these elements. Shanelle, using the New York City mayor's race as a real-time example, what should solidarity among Democrats, progressives, and centrists look like? And I think that's a good question, particularly given that everybody knows about Zohran Mamdani, what he pulled off. Everybody also knows that the Democratic Party establishment is coming after him, et cetera, et cetera. So the question, once again, is using the New York City mayor's race as an example, a real-time example. What should solidarity among Democrats, progressives, and centrists actually look like, since we're talking about solidarity?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that we need to explore, especially in this reactionary period where we have MAGA coalition and white supremacist organizations coming so hard for our communities. I mean, Mandami's campaign was really important because he focused on listening. He has this slogan, listening over lecturing, which I think is really strategic because New Yorkers had a lot to say about what they needed for their city. And, if you read the book, and we hope that your listeners will read the book, you'll learn that storytelling is really the foundation of our democracy. Before people can take any kind of collective action, they have to share a common sense of who they are and what's possible, and also what's worth fighting for in their city, in their community, in their country. And so that shared understanding really helps us get to the ground floor of what we need as a society, and it's built through stories. And so, I think Mandami is really showing us what's possible when we are listening to the people and what they want, and being honest about that. Now, I think the solidarity question between these political factions is a critical one because there is strategy to be played here, and oftentimes we see these factions pitted against each other. But the reality is that not all people are aligned on the same part of the political spectrum. Some people believe in more radical change. I come from a social movement left, as a social movement left practitioner, and from that kind of pedagogy. And I really do believe that we have to expand the notions of what is politically, socially, and economically possible for everyday people. And that is what our opposition wants us to not pay attention to. They don't want us to expand the possibilities. They want to narrow the possibilities of people's lives. And so we have to ask each other, how can we strategically collaborate to create a kind of flank for these different factions? And I'll just give one example of how this worked in 2020. In 2020, I was the director of communications for the Movement for Black Lives, and had the privilege of supporting organizations all over the country build out a campaign to reimagine public safety. Well, certainly we used slogans that were very powerful and emotionally resonant, like defunding the police. And not everybody agreed with that. But the reality is a defund the police frame made possible and palatable frames like reimagining public safety, which is something the progressive class used. So if the radical or more left class is going to use defund the police, and the more progressive class is going to use reimagine public safety, we have just created what's called a foil. And in social movement theory, this means I've just made your frame more relatable, more palatable for people. And that's what I think the Democrats really have to do in this moment. They have to say, well, where are we aligned, and where do we diverge, and how can we use those divergences or those alignments to strengthen our political platform and agenda for everyday working class people?
Nope, I appreciate that, Shanelle. So again, for those who may have just tuned in, the book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. The authors of that book are our guest in this hour, Shanelle Matthews, Marzena Zukowska. And I offer this again, in case you missed this definition earlier, this is their definition. A narrative power framework is a way of seeing and acting to use symbolic resources, stories, messages, and narratives to resist oppression and build power for a liberatory society for all. And they, in this text, build this notion of a narrative power framework around 6 interconnected elements. Let me tell you what they are. We won't have time to walk through all 6 of them. I'll let Marzena pick as she chooses. But these are the 6. Narrative power analysis, principles, traditions, narrative possibilities, narrative opportunities, narrative interventions. So Marzena, I feel like I'm playing Jeopardy now. There's a board, a Jeopardy board behind me with these 6 interconnected elements on them. I just mentioned them. You can choose which one you want to unpack for us.
That's a cruel game, Tavis, but but thank you so much. I think I want to step back and just maybe explain a little bit about why we created the narrative power framework to begin with.
Okay.
Which is that frameworks can, particularly in social movements, but I think also in everyday life, be a really powerful foundation and kind of a reusable foundation for us to make meaning of the world, right? Frameworks kind of shape our understanding of the world and also determine what's possible, what's visible, what's considered normal and acceptable in society. And so, some of the benefits of using kind of a shared framework like this across, for example, different factions, as we were talking about, or different social movements, is that it's a way for us to be proactive rather than reactive and defensive, for us to maintain that kind of sense of coordination so that, if we are pushing a more radical strategy, we're not being thrown under the bus, right, by a more centrist coalition, but that we're able to move in sync with one another because we understand what framework we're using and why we're using it. So, the 6 interconnected elements, I actually think, Tavis, in a very, very quick and succinct way, I could go through them all for you. But the reason these make sense kind of in order for us. So with narrative power analysis, what we're basically talking about is that it's crucial to understand the context in which you're operating in, and kind of the most simple tool that we've had historically that Shanelle and I have used, that a lot of people in our movements have used, is called Battle of the Story, right? So what is the story that we are trying to tell, let's say, as a social movement? Who are the main characters? What is the setting? What's the imagery? What assumptions are we making? And who are our protagonists? And what about our opposition, right? What is their story? Right. And what is the context in which we're kind of battling it out? So it's so hugely important to have this level of analysis done before skipping to that narrative intervention step. So next we've got principles, right? And these are really, the simplest way to put it is like our values in action. So these are the guardrails that should ground and kind of create like a modus operandi for a social movement, right? Like what is it that we're pushing for? What do we believe in? And how do we do it, right? The how is just as important as the what. Traditions is what takes us back, right? So what are the movement traditions that we're operating from? This really helps create a sense of collective identity for a social movement. Shanelle often talks about how crucial it is to understand the Black Lives Matter movement in the context of the Black radical tradition. I have found the same for a lot of the Polish feminist abortion rights organizing that I have done across Europe. Really important to situate ourselves, in Poland's freedom and anti-authoritarian movements of the past. Then we've got...
Marzena, hold that thought. I got to do this right quick. We'll come forward and do the other 3. We've done narrative power analysis, principles, traditions. Again, these are the 6 interconnected elements that build a narrative power framework. The other 3 we'll tackle in a second. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on! Yeah.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we're proud to be celebrating 4 years on the air, but we know we could not have made it this far without you. We work hard every single day to curate conversations that will enlighten, encourage, and empower you. So, from all of us at KBLA Talk 1580, a big thank you for your love and support.
You don't know how much you mean to me.
And by the way, if your smartphone did not update automatically, be sure to download our brand new KBLA 1580 app. We think you'll love all the new features, including new ways to send us photos and video in real time, whenever news breaks, while we're on the air. It's a new dawn, a new day for KBLA Talk 1580, and we're glad you're on this journey with us.
You never turned away, you were right there. Thank you.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to
scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. LA County's new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, or JCOD, is here to support justice-involved individuals and their families. The JCOD Support Center is now taking calls at 1-833-LACJCOD. That's 1-833-522-5263. Available 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., the Support Center is your one-stop shop for re-entry issues and court support. They offer court reminders, connections to local services, transportation assistance for housing, court appearances, and childcare. The JCOD hotline provides personalized help to connect you with services that you need. And don't forget to check out justiceconnect.org for more information. Remember, it's free and available every day at 1-833-522-5263. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
And the top-rated African-American talk show host in the nation, according to Talkers Magazine. You're tapped in with Tavis Smiley right now.
Tavis Smiley, Shanelle Matthews, and Marzena Zukowska, whose book is called Liberation Stories. Their new book, I should say. It's called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. We started this conversation about 50 minutes ago talking about social movements in this moment, how we process these movements, how we build these movements in a reactionary era, as Shanelle Matthews said, a reactionary era like this. And so there are these 6 interconnected elements that are part of building a narrative power framework. We run through the first 3 right quick: narrative power analysis, principles, traditions. My time is tight, Marzena. Take me through the next 3 right quick for me.
Okay, all right. I'll go through it quickly, and then Chanel, if I missed anything. So the next 2 we have are really connected together. It's narrative possibilities and opportunities. So possibilities, we're looking at kind of the full range of what is possible within a political, economic, social system in order to be able to enact change, right? So oftentimes we all, Chanel and I talk about the Overton window, right? Which is in kind of when you're thinking about social science theory, this is like the window of possibility where the public's imagination of what is even considered politically possible, right? I don't know, universal health care, universal basic income, that window is shifted and expands, right? So what seemed radical and unlikely one day becomes the norm, or at least the possibility the other. Now, this needs to be understood in conjunction with narrative opportunities, because, and as Shanelle puts it really eloquently, possibilities are everywhere, but opportunities are the possibilities that you're ready to act on. Right. Mm-hmm. So this is where we take a look and take stock from a social movement perspective of what is it that we are internally prepared to do? What kind of narrative infrastructure do we have that makes it possible for us to act in one moment versus another? To give you a quick example, the Occupy movement, and we have a fantastic chapter in Liberation Stories by Dorian Warren and Catherine Ohlenberger. They talk about how the Occupy movement of the 2010s really shifted the Overton window in terms of economic inequality. But the movement itself wasn't able to take advantage of an opportunity to actually enact any kind of specific policy change. And they go into details around why that was. But the the successors of that movement, the Fight for 15, actually were able to do that. They were organized internally in a way and across the country to bring Fight for 15 and a 15 minimum living wage across states and cities. And narrative interventions, I think that one's self-explanatory. It's, it's the moment for action. What are the strategic actions that we can take to reshape and reinsert new narratives into the public imagination?
And there you have the 6 interconnected elements that make it possible to construct a narrative power framework: narrative power analysis, principles, traditions, narrative possibilities, narrative opportunities, and narrative interventions. When we come forward, we'll give Shanelle Matthews the last word. I want to circle back to something she said earlier, much earlier in this conversation, namely this notion of fear and repression. Got a question about that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Hey man, hey, what's up, bro? What's that station you listening to? Oh man, you don't know? That's Talk Radio, KBLA, 1580 AM. Check it out. 1580 KBLA AM. 1580 Talk Radio. Progressive.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we're celebrating our 4th anniversary, and this track right here is the gift one of our devoted listeners presented to us.
Where you get some information, get a true education to know. Ooh, yeah. 1580.
How cool is that? Having a member of our KBLA delegation write us a song. Stop it! Our listeners love us, and there ain't nothing we can do about it. Wouldn't want to. Thanks to Cardell and everybody else for turning on KBLA Talk 1580. We love you right black.
Now more than ever, Lowe's knows you don't just want a low price, you want the lowest price. And with our lowest price guarantee, you can count on us for competitive prices on all your home improvement projects. If you find a qualifying lower price somewhere else on the same item, we'll match it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Price match applies to same item, current price at qualifying retailers. Exclusions and terms apply. Learn how we'll match price at lowes.com/lowest price guarantee.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
I've got 3.5 minutes left, and I'm going to yield the balance of my time to Shanelle Matthews. I love, Shanelle, all the liberation stories that are shared in this book about how we build narrative power for 21st century social movements. And yet, given the conversation we've had, here's the extra question. How do we do that in a world, as you said, that is fundamentally backward-looking, where fear and repression are hegemonic, where your co-author suggests that there's a global resurgence of fascism, and where I would argue nativism is as real as rain and solidarity is elusive? That's a serious framework in which to build, narrative power and define liberation. You tell me how we do it in the 3 minutes I have left, Shanelle.
I love this question so much. So I mean, we've shared some of this, but we have to challenge fear and repression by refusing to let the opposition set the terms of our conversation or even the limits of our imagination. As I mentioned, reactionary forces thrive by weaponizing fear of change, fear of difference, fear of losing control. They use repression not just to punish us, but to also discourage us, to make us feel small and quiet and less visionary. And so to push back, we need to meet fear with organized clarity and collective vision. So that means telling stories that center dignity instead of domination, abundance instead of scarcity, and solidarity, as you mentioned, Tavis, instead of isolation. It means building the narrative infrastructure, as Mars talked about, of care, of safety, and of connection so that people know that they're not alone when they speak out and take risks. And so I want to leave your audience with 4 tips for telling liberation stories that pushes back against this fear and repression. First, start with the rupture, not just the pain. So don't just document harm. Begin where the system cracked and where people organized. Liberation stories should highlight agency and not just our victimhood. Second, show the we and not just the me. Individual narratives are powerful, but they gain political force when they're tethered to collective struggle. So we always have to connect personal stories to movement demands, historical challenges, and our collective action. 3, frame the fight and the future. Liberation stories must make the problem clear, but they also have to offer a glimpse of the world that we're fighting for. So we want to use language that animates people, and that is fairly materially grounded. One of my heroines, Ida B. Wells, says, never use a word with 2 syllables where one will do. And then finally, name systems and not just symptoms. We want to help people understand that there are structures behind these stories, structures like capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, not just the surface level events. So we want to use simple but precise language. And most importantly, we want to do it collectively and together.
It's a powerful polemic on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a great guidebook, a handbook, if you will, for those interested in liberation. It's called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements, and we need some of those right about now. The authors of that book are Shanelle Matthews and Marzena Zukowska. Shanelle, former communications director for the Movement for Black Lives, as mentioned earlier in this conversation, and Marzena, immigrant rights organizer. Again, the book is called Liberation Stories, Building Narrative Power for 21st Century Social Movements. Marzena, thank you for your time. Delighted to have you on the program today. And Shanelle, thank you for your presence as well. Appreciate both of you. All right, 1 more hour to go of Tavis Smiley. Stay with us.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. 10 days after historic floods hit Texas Hill County, over 160 people remain missing. Kerrville officials say rain is slowing search efforts near Lake Nimitz. Kerrville Assistant Manager Michael Hornez says they are still searching.
They have a hard time searching in there because that water is you can't see through it.
The statewide death toll has now climbed past 130. The HBCU community is demanding the release of Morehouse grad Alex Maganda, detained by ICE in Texas. Supporters say his arrest highlights the risks Black immigrants face. The Free Alex Maganda movement is gaining national attention. And T-Mobile has dropped its DEI programs under pressure from the Trump administration. The move, praised by some federal officials, has sparked backlash from civil rights leaders who warn it threatens workplace equity. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers head into the All-Star break after taking 2 of 3 from the Giants in San Francisco. They scored 3 runs after 2 outs in the 11th inning Sunday to beat the Giants 5-2. The Dodgers will have 4 players in the All-Star game Tuesday night in Atlanta. Catcher Will Smith, first baseman Freddie Freeman, designated hitter Shohei Ohtani, and pitcher Clayton Kershaw. The Angels ended the first half of the season with a 5-1 loss at home to Arizona. Even though the Angels are 2 games below 500 at 47-49, they have 6 more wins than what they had last season at the All-Star break. They were 14 games under 500 at the break last year. The Angels are 11-10 with interim manager Ray Montgomery. Montgomery took over for Ron Washington on June 20th when Washington stepped down because of undisclosed health reasons. Washington won one of 2 black managers in Major League Baseball, will not return this season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we're proud to be celebrating 4 years on the air, but we know we could not have made it this far without you. We work hard every single day to curate conversations that will enlighten, encourage, and empower you. So, from all of us at KBLA Talk 1580, a big thank you for your love and support.
You don't know how much you mean to me.
And by the way, if your smartphone did not update automatically, be sure to download our brand new KBLA 1580 app. We think you'll love all the new features, including new ways to send us photos and video in real time, whenever news breaks, while we're on the air. It's a new dawn, a new day for KBLA Talk 1580.
You never turn away, you were right there.